So in this video, we're gonna cover a bunch of things. I'm gonna start off with showing you how to program some simple beats, like rock beats, shuffle grooves. I'm gonna touch on ghost notes as well. After that, I'm gonna show you syncopated beats and how the interplay between the kick and the snare drum can really change the context and feel of a riff. After that, we're gonna touch on blast beats for a little bit as well. Now, of course, this isn't exactly a by-the-book way. This is just my personal approach, and hopefully this video will give you some insight into that. Okay, so now that we're gonna get started with this, this is what I'm using for my kit. It's mainly Metal Machine, and gonna sort of go through all the sounds here. This is my drum map setup right here. And the only thing out of the ordinary that I should probably mention is that I've got this one key where I've layered this Avatar sample, near Z Custom, just because I kind of like the way it sounds. And I prefer the Avatar China on the right here, so I X-drum that in. It's not really important for this video because I'm not really going over sounds, but just kind of wanted to show you what I'm working with here. So to start off, I figured we'd do something simple, and what's simpler than a rock beat? And this is just something I pre-programmed. I've actually pre-programmed a whole bunch of stuff here, but I will show you how I go about programming it. So this is the Cubase drum editor, which is something I really like. It's specifically made for programming drums, so it's very easy, very simple. And you have this drumstick tool right here where you just literally click notes in and out. So that makes it very simple. I have my drum map right here, which explains what everything is. So you can see like kick, snare solo, snare layer, toms, hats, crash. And that way I know where everything is. And you can see right here, that's kick, snare, and there's a hi-hat. So if I play this beat, you can follow along. And I know that drum beat is absolutely riveting, but I figured it would be a good place to start. So what's going on here is I usually like to start with, let's delete this for example, the kick and snare. The interplay between the kick and the snare is probably the most important part of a drum beat. That's what determines the feel. That's what determines how the riff or whatever is playing underneath is interpreted. So a rock beat is just basically like kind of this even expression between the two. And I'm doing this to the bar. Now here, you can change the grid. So right now it's quarter notes, you can do 16th notes if you want to have more resolution. Again, I like Cubase because I find it very simple to program this stuff. Like if you wanted to do straight double bass, just kind of click and drag. Now, what I'm gonna show you can be applied to basically any DAW, but obviously I'm gonna be doing it in this, and it might be a little bit simpler in this just because I know this drum editor is very handy for programming drums specifically. Now, we've got this basic beat going here. You can always put the click on if you want some context there. Here we've got just a basic beat going. And what I like to do with the hi-hats, for example, simple beat like this. So I've got this tight hi-hat sample here, and sort of a really tight. This one's more of an edge, and this one's a tip. And I like to think of the way that I would play drums, or anyone would play drums. You really don't need to play drums to be able to program well, as long as you study and understand how drums work, what is physically possible with four limbs, and what drummers' tendencies are, or even what creates the sounds that what you're hearing. So for example, with a rock beat, there's these accents, and then there's these softer hits in between. And this creates a good dynamic. So, you do it like that. You can sort of group them like this and bring them down if you want. And I find that using different samples, ones that are sort of targeted to heavier hits and ones that are targeted to tighter hits, can work, as opposed to putting them on the same track, which starts to sound a bit more fake. I think this sounds a bit more realistic. So you could just do that through, like that. And usually I like to start off with a crash of some kind. Sometimes you can do two. A lot of drummers start like that with two, you know. You can kind of visualize it. The idea is you only have 4 limbs, so you can't be hitting 2 cymbals and a hi-hat at the same time. So that's the kind of attention to detail that I think is really important when you're programming. And this sounds like this. Now those are some little ghost notes I put there. The good thing, I'm using tune track drums, obviously, and they multi-sample these, so as your velocity goes up, the sample changes. So I kind of experiment with what's appropriate. When the drums are by themselves, you can get away with softer ghost notes. In the mix, I actually do turn them up a bit more because I know the guitars, bass, and everything, they don't tend to cut. But for here, you can hear, gives it that nice little roll into the next section. And here I've got a little fill. Now there's no real secret to this. This is just kind of what you hear in your head or experimenting. I mean, you have a grid here that's open, so you can really just plug notes in wherever you want. Obviously, that's not gonna sound very good. But a lot of the stuff that I do is just from experimentation, trying things out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And eventually you'll be able to hear things in your head and sort of figure it out. You'd be like, oh, I want okay, how do you do that? And, you know, that's basically how that works right there. Next section. So you'll notice I have this R samples track right here. That's reinforcement samples. It is literally to reinforce the samples that I've got, and it gives everything a bit more punch. I don't really need it when the drums are by themselves, but if I were to put them on, I mean, it's not a drastic difference, but in the mix it does make. You can hear it adds a little something, and I do find that in the mix it does make it sound a bit bigger, a little bit more in your face, which I like. And I pretty much just have the kick and snare reinforced, and I've mapped them so that they're on the same keys, so I can literally just drag this down and copy it when I'm done programming. This all appears, and the kick and snare are the only thing that get reinforced. Now getting into more advanced beats, if you will, though this isn't really advanced at all, but it's just more about attention to detail. So I want to do like a shuffle groove for you here, and I pre-programmed this. You can see what it looks like. And that's basically the groove. It looks like there's a lot going on, and the key to this is just kind of building it up piece by piece. So like what we've got here is just, again, the main thing is the interplay between the snare and the kick, which is the basis for the whole thing. So if we were to take this out, we take out these ghost notes here, what you've got, I'll put the clicks, or actually no, the click's not gonna work with that because it's triplet, but some stray cymbal hits here. So, if I was to give this some context by just putting my ride bell, let's say, every quarter note here, you'd hear how that works. And that's what determines that shuffle feel there. And you need to set this to triplet if you want that kind of, the triplet feel, the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the grid is based around that. Now you see everything lines up all neatly. And I wanted to talk a little bit about ghost notes here, because I know it's a big thing. And it makes a very big difference. Now the whole thing with ghost notes is they are exactly that. They're almost implied more so than direct hits. They're basically just soft hits. So doing anything in this sort of range, and you can always do it to taste. The sample you're using will always greatly affect where the right place is. So don't necessarily just copy exactly what you see here. You really want to listen for it. And it's very easy because you can just adjust the velocities until it sounds about right. I'd say always kind of go easier with them first, because if you start to do ghost notes that are too loud, it'll start to sound very fake. It's all in the subtleties. But what I like to do here is get this sort of motion going with the ride for like these shuffle grooves. So it's like tin, 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 right? You can just kind of randomly. And then you can just sort of fill in these gaps. See these gaps here? And what you're doing is essentially creating a little bit of a linear groove, and linear means that no two things are playing at once. Now, of course, sometimes you have things that are playing at once, but it's kind of filling in the gaps so that you have this sort of constant motion between drums, and it does create a very cool effect, both live and program. You can do them right after hard hits, like that. Right, that's taken there. So you see it sort of lines up here. I can see there's a gap there. And of course, you could put ghost notes over more if you want. You know, there's no rules. It's just whatever sounds good to you. You can say I'm just sort of messing around with this in real time. And you can add accents wherever, you know? And that will kind of change the context of the drums if you want it to have this more lively feel. It's all based around the same kind of feel, but you see how the interplay between the kick and the snare really changes the context of everything. So this is what I like to get playful with. There's obviously no riff underneath this, but if there was, you could really see how the riff starts to change depending on where the placement of the kicks and snares are. And then I like to use that as the basis for where I put my cymbal hits and whatnot, you know, because you could have crashes hit certain accents, you know, like maybe this one here. So on and so forth. It's all this little stuff. And as you see, like, you know, this seemingly simple beat is kind of taking shape and it's getting a little bit more complicated. Another thing I like to do is there's nothing on the kick drum here that's really that complicated. It's these single hard hits. And I love me some pedal hat. So, you know, just put in pedal hat right here. That's the one that you actually do with your left foot. So as you're playing, it's just keeping time. And generally, I mean, again, there's no rules with this, but the way I like to do it is just get something constant going. It kind of is a good way to keep time, especially if you have like your cymbals doing other accents or whatever. You have this one constant the whole time. So at this tempo and with this kind of beat, I think quarter notes would be most appropriate. It's very subtle. It's not something that's supposed to be like super loud or anything, but it does make a difference, especially with the ghost notes. It creates this interplay between the snare and the pedal hat. And with certain beats, you can almost get like a 60th note roll going between your ghost notes, snare drum, and the pedal hat. It's pretty cool. So that's probably the only thing. And you know what? I can actually drag this over this whole thing because even over the fill, because those are doubles, but you know what? You can do those with one foot. Now on this fill here, you can see like I've kind of like lowered the velocities. I wouldn't always do this. This is in my mind a bit more of a rock thing, a bit more natural. If you're going for metal, you know, you can just like completely just bring that, you know, if you want that sound. But I figured for this, we're going for a bit more subtle. I do think it is actually realistic you know, if you're a drummer who could play good doubles, it's totally fine to have that pedal hat going because you're only doing 2 doubles. I guess the only place that would need something is here because 3 is pretty hard with 1. So maybe change that to, actually to make this more realistic, yeah, I would just move that down to like another tom. There we go. And now that's playable with the pedal hat through. So it's just little things like that. That just goes to show you like the sort of thought process that I have. Sometimes I'll even like air drum stuff out or see if it's realistic. Make sure I'm not doing something that would be impossible or a complete pain in the ass for a drummer to play. Not that that should matter, should it?